Writing is one of our most important foundational technologies. Actually, it's two of them. It's a communications tool that can get a thought out of Aristotle's head and into mine over thousands of years and miles, but it's also a tool to think complex thoughts. Confusing or vague writing not only makes it harder to write a research paper or grant that other people can understand, it also makes it harder to develop the ideas in that research paper or grant. So let's talk about putting the technology of writing to work. Let's talk about active sentences. A sentence, at its heart, is a tiny story. It has a main character and a plot, an actor taking an action. The actor in the sentence is its subject. The action that actor takes is the predicate. If you have those two things, you have a sentence. The jobs in a sentence can be performed by a word, a phrase, or a clause, but for the sake of example, let's keep things simple. Marie Curie experimented. Marie Curie is our actor or subject. The action she took, experimented, is our predicate. Subject and predicate are the two indispensable roles in a sentence that must be filled. But there are two other roles that can be filled: objects and modifiers. Objects are the people or things that our actor is taking action against, or with, or to. There are different kinds of objects depending on the action in a sentence, but they all complete the action. They complete the predicate. Marie Curie experimented with radium. Radium is the object, the thing Marie Curie experimented with. A sentence's modifiers tell us everything else. We already know who our actor is and what they're doing, but how are they doing it? Where? Why? When? Marie Curie experimented with radium in her lab, on a Tuesday, constantly and much to the annoyance of her neighbors. Modifier, modifier, modifier. The key to writing clear and effective sentences is to remember that the actor and the action are the sentence. Objects and modifiers might contain important information, but the main character and plot are essential. Build around them. To do that, make sure your subject and predicate are direct, concrete, and active. A direct sentence places the subject and predicate as close to the beginning of the sentence as possible. Until we know who or what is taking action and what action they're taking, we don't know what the sentence is about. Unless you have a compelling reason to create a little suspense, put your subject and predicate at the front of the sentence, as close together as possible, and state them in as few words as possible. A concrete sentence uses actors that are specific and tangible rather than abstract or vague. A mouse, an experimenter, or a gene are all concrete actors. An idea, a process, or a system are all abstract actors. Abstract to concrete is a spectrum, not a binary. Marie Curie's isolation of radium is an abstraction or a concept. It's not tangible. Isolating radium is an activity, a more concrete subject. Marie Curie herself is more tangible still. Sometimes abstractions are unavoidable. You might need to use an idea or a process as your subject. But making many small improvements, shifting a subject from a concept to an activity, for example, can have a large cumulative effect. Most importantly, identify the most active and dynamic thing happening in your sentence and make that your action. There will always be a verb at the center of your predicate, and there are 4 kinds of verbs: to be, linking verbs, intransitive verbs, and transitive verbs. When revising, keep an eye out for to be and linking verbs. They are the least active. They contain the least information. To be is a critical verb in the English language, and it has its uses, but it is barely active at all. It means only that something exists. It is the very least action the subject of a sentence can take. Linking verbs, such as to do, to make, or to have, are only slightly more active than to be. All verbs fall along this spectrum. To indicate is more active than to be, but less active than to cut into. When writing about experiments or ideas, something being indicated or demonstrated might be the most dynamic action in a sentence. But that's all the more reason to take any and every other opportunity to use a more active predicate. The most common reason a sentence is not direct, concrete, and active is because the subject and predicate have been miscast. The writer has lost track of the actor and shoved the action off to the side. The sentence becomes inert and lifeless, passive instead of active. Experiments were done by Marie Curie. Curie, the person actually doing something, is not the subject of this sentence. She's been shuffled over into the object role, and her experiments are forced to play the part of the subject. Because the experiments aren't actually doing anything, we're stuck with the predicate were, a form of to be. The experiments simply exist. Nothing else is happening in this sentence. This is another reason to be on the lookout for the verb to be. Passive sentences like this will always have a predicate built around to be or other linking verbs. The good news is that all the information we need to revise this sentence is already buried inside. The noun experiments, as we know from our previous example, can easily become the active verb experimented. That moves Curie, the actor in the sentence, back into the subject role where she belongs. Making this sentence active, finding the most dynamic thing happening and building around that, makes everything else fall into place. Direct, concrete, and active are all linked. Revise for one, and the others will follow. No offense to Marie Curie, let's look at some examples from the real world. This is the opening sentence from an article about using augmented reality to assist in surgery. If you strip away the modifiers, the story of this sentence is, headsets have become devices to support tasks. That's abstract and vague, and there's no need to tell your readers that headsets are devices. There are more concrete actors and actions buried in this sentence, and a simple revision can bring them to the fore. Provide is a relatively abstract verb, but it's more active than become. And instead of supporting tasks, let's focus on the people performing those tasks. The story of the revised sentence is, headsets provide enhancements that can assist users. The rest of the paper will fill in the specifics, but this is now an active opening sentence. This sentence comes from a well-written article, but both clauses fall back on relatively passive constructions. Disordered tails are subject to modifications, and modifications are sensed by proteins. We can revise the first predicate from the three-word phrase are subject to the simpler undergo. Still not the most active verb in the world, but revision is about improvement, not perfection. Separating the second clause and making it its own sentence allow us to flip another passive construction to an active one. The proteins, which are actually doing the sensing, are now the subject. In this sentence that appeared in the journal Biochemistry, the predicate is again more abstract than it needs to be. Investigating reactions is obviously critical to this research, but that doesn't mean it's the most active thing happening in this sentence. This revision puts the more concrete use of computational quantum chemistry into the predicate slot and allows us to clarify the string of modifiers at the end of this sentence. There is no perfect sentence, but if you make your writing more direct, concrete, and active, you'll be able to think more clearly, communicate your ideas to more people, and to improve the flow of information that is the bedrock of good science.